Okay, in this set of lectures, I'm going to talk about how to identify arguments. By identifying arguments, I mean knowing when or determining when there is an argument in a passage that we read or in something that somebody says. So the first thing to notice about this is that not everything that people say or write expresses an argument. For instance, the passages on this slide, none of them express an argument because none of them involve a set of claims where some of the claims are intended as support for others of the claims. If someone says, I love you, I feel like we're made for each other, these are two very nice things to say, but it's not like one of them is intended as support for the other one. It's not like I'm trying to convince you that I love you because I feel like we're made for each other, or that I'm trying to convince you that I feel like we're made for each other because I love you. They're just two very nice and related things to say to somebody, but they're not standing in a justificatory relationship with one another. It's not that one of them is supposed to provide evidence for the other. With the second passage, the same thing is true. It's not that one of these statements is supposed to provide evidence for the other. In fact, one of the sentences in this passage isn't even a statement, technically. It's not a claim. So look at the light on the water is a imperative sentence, not a declarative sentence. So it doesn't even count as a claim. So that can't be an argument because there aren't two or more claims where one of them is, at least one of them is serving as support for another of them. And then finally, the last passage is just 3 data points. You can imagine, maybe one person in a lab just reporting to another person in the lab, the thermometer in the control solution reads this, the thermometer in solution A reads this, and solution B is at this temperature. That's just 3 pieces of information. They're related, but they're not related in the form that one is providing support for the other or one is providing evidence for the other. So I'm probably saying more about this than I need to, but just the basic point is, not everything that you read will be an argument. You could read a story, for instance. A story isn't usually an argument. You could read a poem. You could read expressions of emotion. Lots of things that people say and do with language are not arguments. So what we want to do is find out, how can we tell when some bit of language, some passage that someone has written or utters, speaks, how can we tell when some piece of language actually has an argument in it? Okay. Well, we already have our definition of argument, right? An argument is a set of claims where some are intended as justification for others. So what I'd like you to do is, just applying that definition, can you look over this set of examples and can you tell for each of these examples whether that passage, that item that's listed by that number, 1, 2, and so on, that passage, whether that passage contains an argument or not? Okay, so go ahead and in a moment pause the video and try to say which of these passages, 1 through 9, which of them contain an argument and which ones do not. And then when you start the video again, I will give you the right answers. Okay, so here's the correct answer. There are really just 3 arguments in this set. Okay, none of the other passages expresses an argument. I'm going to explain why that is for some of them in just a moment. The first passage is pretty clearly expressing an argument. The conclusion of the argument would be the woman in the hat is not a witch, and there are 2 pieces of evidence being offered in support of that are working together to support that conclusion. So one is that witches have long noses, and this woman doesn't have a long nose, so that is supposed to convince us that the woman is not a witch. Okay, here is a case where some of the claims in the passage are being offered as evidence for another of the claims. Therefore, this is an argument. The second passage is not an argument because it's really just giving one piece of information or making one claim. It's saying, I've been doing this thing for a long time, or I've been doing this thing this long. And there's no justificatory relation between different parts of the passage. There's nothing is being offered as evidence to believe anything else. Nothing is being argued for, okay? It's just information is being conveyed or a claim is being made, but no argument is being made. The third passage does express an argument, and here the word so is an indication that what follows that word is a conclusion. It's just a kind of clue. It's not a guarantee that what follows it is a conclusion. But in this case, it does seem to be indicating that that's a conclusion. So if you think about what's going on here, someone is saying they're communicating two claims or two pieces of information. One is Albert is angry with me, and the other is he probably won't be willing to help me wash the dishes. But the so indicates that this person believes that the second claim is supported by the first claim, or that the first claim is a reason to believe the second claim. Okay, so this passage does have a justificatory structure, or a supporting structure between one of its claims and another of its claims, and therefore it does express an argument. Number 4, that passage does express two claims, but those claims are not related in any justificatory or evidential way. It's not that washing the dishes is supposed to be evidence that I dried them, or my drying the dishes is supposed to be evidence that I washed them. It's just that first one thing happened, then another thing happened. So whoever it is that's stated this or written this, it's pretty clear that they're just making two claims that are temporally related. They're related through time, but it's not that one of them is supposed to provide evidence for the other. So it's not an argument. Now 5 is a little bit tricky. Some of you probably did list this as an argument, but that would be a mistake. Let me explain why. So if we read 5 carefully, what it says is really just one claim. It really makes just one claim. So the passage reads, if the road wasn't icy, the car wouldn't have slid off the turn. Think about what this is saying. It's not making two claims that the road wasn't icy and the car wouldn't have slid off the turn, right? That would be a mistaken reading. It's not saying two separate things. Because in fact, the person who makes this claim probably doesn't believe that the road wasn't icy, right? They're not asserting that the road wasn't icy. Probably the road was icy, right? And that's part of what motivates them even saying this in the first place. So it's not when what they're doing here is that whoever's stating this sentence, they're making a if-then claim, or what is called a conditional claim. Okay, conditional meaning the second part of the claim is conditional on the first part of the claim. Okay, and it's a single claim. It's an if-then statement. Conditional statements can be expressed as if-then statements, and in this case, it is expressed as an if-then statement. The then is left out. It's kind of it's not explicitly stated, but it's implied. Okay, so if the road was icy, the car wouldn't have slid off the turn. The claim that's being made is about a connection between two possible things that can happen. It's saying if some state of the world was the case, then some other thing would follow. It's making a claim about a relation between possibilities, basically. Okay, so it's saying when the world is a certain way, then these other things follow. And that is a single claim. It's a claim about a hypothetical situation. It's a claim about conditional relations between ways things can be. Okay, but it's still just a single claim. It's not two claims. And because it's not two claims, then it can't be an argument, right? Because it can't be that one of the claims is being offered in support of the other, because there isn't more than one claim. There's just one claim. So you want to be careful not to confuse conditional statements with arguments. We're going to look at some more techniques soon that will allow us to be careful about this and not get confused. But for now, when you it may be as simple as just to say, when you see an if-then statement, be careful. Don't think of that as two different claims. Think of that as a single conditional claim. I think the other items are fairly self-explanatory, so I won't go into detail about them. I will just note that with 8, the expression is shown by is an example of something that we can call a premise indicator. In other words, it's kind of a clue that what follows the shown by is a premise in an argument, and that what comes before the is shown by is a conclusion in an argument. Because if you think about it, what is it for one thing to show another thing in this sense of shown that's used here? What is that except for one thing to provide evidence for another thing, or one thing to justify belief in another thing, right? And so that is shown by is a clue that the claims in this passage are related to one another, where one is supposed to provide evidence for the other, and that is what defines an argument. So that's part of how we can tell that 8 is an argument. Again, if you just read it and think about what's going on, what's being said here is that the rise in obesity rates is evidence that obesity has become a problem in the US, or the rise in obesity rates justifies the claim that obesity has become a problem in the US. So again, this passage does contain an argument.